Dear learners and listeners, today we will be discussing on the topic gender gaps in labor force participation and economy. And I am Dr. Nisha Varghese from School of Extension and Development Studies, IGNOU. In this session, we will be discussing various issues related to women and work. Let us first come to discuss about the traditional discourse and the contemporary discourse on women and work. Coming to the first one, that is the traditional discourse on women and work. As you all know, the early human societies were egalitarian and they lived in nomadic settlements, going from one place to another, living in different regions and different parts of the country. The main occupation of men were hunting, fishing and providing necessary raw materials for food and making tools that were necessary to accomplish these tasks. Whereas women on the other hand cared for the house, they prepared food, clothing and also looked after children. Later on, people started settling in stable settlements. All the wealth was a result of production, which was a male activity. The production was more valued than running of household and household labor. Life got divided into two realms, the economic realm and the household realm. Most of the economic realm was managed by the male and the household realm was managed by the female. There was a new definition of work. Work got defined as an activity or expenditure of energy that produces services and products of value to other people. Although work can be performed without wages, salaries or income. However, economically speaking, labor market work was strictly confined to work performed for pay. Work is productive if and only if profits are produced. The capitalist system regarded women as reserve army of labor. For example, in both the world wars, that is World War I and World War II, when men were sent for fighting the wars in the army, the women took over the jobs done by men. And later on, when the men returned, the women were asked to go back home. The women also started being associated with unpaid work. Most of the service providing works like caring for children, caring for the elderly, cleaning, cooking, etc. came under the women's domain. Coming to the contemporary discourse on women and work. The Danish economist Esther Bostrup highlighted women as productive members of society instead of needy beneficiaries. The global labor force participation rate for women is 49%, whereas that for men is 75%. Some regions face a gap of more than 50% points in terms of male and female labor force participation rates. Women who want to work have a harder time finding jobs than men. And in today's world, women tend to overrepresent certain types of vulnerable jobs like which do not have those jobs which do not have a social security or which do not have healthy environments for work. The gender roles and pressures to conform to these roles was mainly on women. For example, all the works related to caring for the elderly, caring for children, etc. were confined to women. Then there was undervaluation of traditionally feminine skills. For example, the women lace workers in Narsapur, Andhra Pradesh, they get paid very low, though the lace working industry has flourished since 1970s, but still the wages earned by the women working in these factories or these industries is less than 1/3 of what an agricultural laborer gets. So there is undervaluation of traditionally feminine skills like this example of lace working in Narsapur, Andhra Pradesh. The proportion of unpaid work per day is far higher for women than for men globally, while in case of India, on an average 66% of women's work is unpaid as per the World Economic Forum. Working women face the glass ceiling and have to be contented with modest profiles. We will be discussing about the concept of glass ceiling in our as we proceed further in this session. Coming to the gender gaps in labor force participation. As is clear from this table, there is a huge gender gap in workforce participation rate among male and female. Where in rural areas, the workforce participation in case of female is 30%, while that of male is 53%. Whereas in urban areas, the condition is far more worse, where the female workforce participation rate is 15.4%, whereas that of male is 53.76%. In total, if we see, the male workforce participation is 53.26%, while that of female is less than half of that of male, that is 25.51%. Now coming to the distribution of workforce according to the broad employment status as stated by NSSO, the 68th round. As we can see again, in different categories of employment, that is self-employment, regular wage or salaried jobs and casual labor, the participation of women is lower than that of men in all the jobs. For example, in regular salaried jobs, the participation of women in rural areas is only 5.6%, whereas that of men is 10%. In the same way, when we come to casual laborer, the participation of women is 35.1%, whereas that of male is 35.5%. While we look to the workforce distribution in urban areas, there is not much difference between that of male and female participation rates. Coming to the average wage rate received per day by regular employees. As we can see from the table, in case of rural areas, the wages earned by women is only 201.56 Indian rupees, whereas that of male is 322.28 Indian rupees. In urban areas, again there is a lot of disparity between the wages, average wages earned by men and women. In case of female, the average wage earned is 366.15 rupees, whereas that earned by men is 469.87 rupees. Coming to the average wage rate according to the NSSO round for different work categories. For works other than public work, the average wage rate earned by female is 103 rupees, whereas that of male is 149 rupees. Again, you can see a lot of disparity in the wage rates between male and female in public works, in MG Narega and in works other than MG Narega works. Coming to the violence and vulnerability that women face at work, there are different forms of occupational violence that is experienced by working women. For example, threats, physical or verbal or non-verbal abuse. This is one form of violence which is experienced by women at work. Second one is sexual harassment by employers or even employees or contractors and clients. The third one is human trafficking for sexual exploitation or for working as forced labor. Most of the human trafficking is for domestic work, particularly the female migrant workers in developing countries. They go to people's home and they are often exploited either sexually or they are made to work for around 18 hours a day without even a single day's break in the entire week, and even the wages that they are paid is very low. Again, There could be vulnerability in terms of the working conditions. They are made to work in difficult conditions. They are made to work even when they are not well. They are made to stay, they are not provided proper food to eat. So these are the different kinds of vulnerabilities that women face at work. Now coming to gender and employment. Employment is commonly defined as a state of being in a paid work by an individual. According to National Sample Survey Organization, employment is categorized as three types. One is self-employed, the second one is employed on regular wage, and the third one is employed on casual wage. Now let us look at what is gender segregation. Gender segregation is a process by which men and women end up in different types of occupation, leading to existence of two different types of labor markets. One for women with limited opportunities of growth, and the other for men who have much better job prospects than women. Now, since when did the gender segregation of employment take place? Most of the gender segregation of employment has taken place post liberalization, that is after 1990s. After the 1990s, what happened is the role of primary sector in providing livelihood to the masses reduced, and there was an expansion of the secondary sector and the tertiary sectors. The secondary sectors include most of the manufacturing industries, and the tertiary sectors include the service sector. As a result of this expansion of secondary and tertiary sectors and contraction of the primary sector, there was male outmigration from rural areas to urban areas in search of employment in these two sectors. As a result of which, the female were left behind to both care for the families as well as to take care of the agriculture back home. This phenomenon is popularly known as feminization of agriculture. Now, even if the female migrated along with male to cities in search of jobs, they had to restrict themselves to unskilled jobs, lower paid jobs. So, this is how gender segregation of employment has taken place over years. Now, there are three different levels of gender segregation. The first one is internal gender segregation. The second one is horizontal gender segregation, and the third one is vertical gender segregation. Let us look at each of them. The first one, that is internal gender segregation. Women and men are employed in the same occupation, but they carry out different levels of work functions. For example, in schools, most of the primary teaching is given to the females, whereas the secondary teaching is given to the males. So, this is a form of internal gender segregation where they are working in the same institution, but the primary teaching is given to the female counterparts and the secondary teaching is given to the male counterparts. Now, the second one is horizontal gender segregation. The women work in certain occupations. For example, in case of women, they work in service sectors. They work as service providers in terms of providing services to the caring for in terms of caring for the elderly, caring for the children, caring for the household. So, this is one type of gender segregation in which women are involved in certain occupations, whereas the men are involved in totally different kinds of occupations. For example, men go out and work in industries. They are employed as wage earners, regular salaried earners, whereas women are confined to providing services at home or outside. The third one is vertical gender segregation, in which within the same occupation, men tend to occupy higher managerial positions and women comparatively occupy lower positions. For example, in schools, Most of the teachers may be female, but a principal is generally a male. So you can see that the higher managerial positions are given to the male counterparts, whereas the lower positions are given to the female counterparts. Now coming to employment of women in both formal and informal sectors. Let us discuss about women employment in both organized and unorganized sectors. Coming to women employment in unorganized sectors. In unorganized sectors, 1/3 of the working force is women, and the women working in unorganized sectors are confined more to rural areas working in agriculture. Out of the female workforce working in unorganized sectors in the urban areas, 80% of the women working in the urban areas are working in unorganized sectors. They are engaged in activities like petty traders such as vegetable sellers, flower sellers, ironing, construction workers, domestic maids, etc. Coming to employment of women in organized sectors. Post-liberalization, women have entered into several organized sectors, for example, information technology and information technology enabled services. They have also found employment in various clerical positions. They have also found employment in various teaching positions. Then in manufacturing sectors, for example, various industries like fertilizer industries, pesticides, paints, chemical products, dyeing, bleaching, electrical and electronic equipments, garment manufacturing, etc. Women have a major presence in all these manufacturing industries. Then 3/4 of women in organized sectors are in jobs requiring good educational qualification. This shows that women employment in the organized sectors is more of an urban phenomenon, excluding the rural women from the jobs in organized sectors, because as we saw, most of the women in the rural areas are working in unorganized sectors. Let us now discuss various challenges faced by working women in India. Women of certain class and social groups have not been able to gain knowledge and skills due to lack of educational opportunities. Educational opportunities are not equally available to all the women belonging to all the sections of the societies. According to 2011 census, although women constitute 48% of the population, but their participation in labor market is half of that of men, as we had already seen in our previous slide. The participation of women in workforce is around 25%, whereas that of men is close to 53%. The educated middle class women face issues of work-life balance. The women are supposed to assume the various roles at home, like that of a mother, that of a wife, that of a daughter-in-law, or that of a daughter, and they are also supposed to go out and work. So they find issues in managing or balancing between their work and personal life. Then unskilled, uneducated women work under unregulated work norms. They are supposed to work at low wages, they are asked to work for longer working hours, and they face several other discriminations. Then both the sections of women are subjected to medical and health problems because of longer working hours, because of a lack of rest, because of lack of proper medical facilities. They face more health problems than men. Now let us look at what is decent work. The concept of decent work for all was put forth by the International Labour Organization to promote opportunities for both male and female to obtain decent and productive work in conditions of freedom, equality, security, and human dignity. The 4 pillars of decent work are employment and enterprise, then rights at work. They should have proper rights in their workplaces. Then social protection, which is again very important. They need to have social protection. For example, women getting maternity leaves, paid maternity leaves, and the child care leaves, etc. Then dialogue. Women should be allowed to raise their voice against any injustices done. They should have a say in the at the place where they are employed. So this is the concept of decent work. Now coming to what are the impacts of globalization on women's employment. The economic activity of women has increased over the past 3 decades since globalization, but they are concentrated in low paid jobs at the lowest rung of occupational hierarchy. The forces of globalization in developing countries have enhanced the burden of poor and tribal women due to commercialization of natural resources, thus depriving them from their options of sustainable livelihood. Then in agricultural sector, the international players have created so much of price fluctuations which has caused distress among female farmers and cultivators. Let us now look at some of the challenges that women face in their employment. Some of the most common impacts of globalization, or some of the most common challenges that women face are feminization of employment and labor force. There has been post-liberalization, there has been an overcrowding of employment market by women, especially in various sectors like in various industries, like as we had already discussed, for example in fertilizer industries, chemical industries, various IT industries, there has been a crowding of employment market by women. And secondly, the condition of employment of women have become precarious and flexible, because there are so many women working in going out to work these days. However, their condition has not improved, and they have to face several discriminations. They have to face they work under several vulnerable conditions. The second one is marginalization and informalization. Women are overrepresented in informal sectors, as we had already seen. Women participation of women in regular salaried jobs is very less as compared to that of men. Then exploitation of women workers through low wages, denial of rights to organize, migration to urban centers, and poor living conditions of migrant workers. Then another challenge is sexual harassment at workplace. This sexual harassment at workplace is an extension of violence against women in everyday life, targeting and exploiting the vulnerability of women at workplace. Women are subjected to verbal form of sexual harassment or physical form of sexual harassment at several workplaces. Then the condition of employment of women have become very precarious and flexible. The fourth one is sex work. The sex workers in brothels, as devdasis or as joginis and under such other traditional systems, force the girls into prostitution, particularly those girls from lower class or lower castes. They are subject to work as sex workers in under different names. So this is another challenge that that women are facing. And then there are 3 approaches to sex work. One is legalization, that the sex work is legalized and it is not considered illegal. The second approach is decriminalization. The sex work is not listed as a criminal offense. And the third one is sex work as a human right, which most of the sex workers are demanding these days, that it should be considered as a work, as an employment, and it should be considered as a human right. Then we come to servicization. Extension of violence against women in everyday life, targeting and exploiting the vulnerability of women at a workplace. Then conditions of employment of women have become very precarious and flexible, and in most of the service sectors. Then we come to glass ceiling. Women face obstacles to move upward in upward position in their chosen field. As we had already seen that the school teachers are a woman, a female who joins as a primary school teacher may maximum go as a secondary school teacher, but the chances of her becoming a principal become very dim, because these are generally defined as male dominated roles, and women are not given such opportunities. Due to this, women have less decision making powers. Then coming to another challenge, that is that of double burden. In order to fulfill their responsibilities at workplace and at home, women end up working for longer hours. Firstly, they have to do all the household chores like cooking, cleaning, taking care of the children, and then they have to rush for work, and again at work they have to work for the entire working hour, the office hours, and then come back home, and then again take care of the needs of the family. So ultimately, women end up sharing double the burden of both the workplace as well as that of home. Now, another challenge that is faced by especially by migrant women who join the informal sectors due to low level of skills and education include women find difficulties in providing care to their own children due to long working hours at their workplaces and because of low payment. So this is one of the major difficulties faced by women while tending to their jobs outside. For example, most of the migrant women, they work as domestic help in many of the houses in the cities. So in order to take care of the house of someone else where they go to work, they often end up neglecting their own house, their own children. Then women and children may also face sexual exploitation. For example, when the migrant women, especially girls, when they are trafficked and when they are sent as domestic maids in different households, there they may be subject to different kinds of exploitations, sexual exploitations, long working hours, as we had already discussed. Then lack of infrastructure like sanitation and water, migrant workers face severe health hazards because of these. Because when the migrant workers migrate to cities, they end up living in slums or unauthorized colonies where they do not have proper sanitation and water facilities, they do not have separate toilets, because of which they may face severe health hazards. Then they may lack social security due to migration. The migrant workers do not have official papers, they do not have records, they are not enrolled anywhere, as a result of which they are unable to avail any of the social security schemes that are available, any government social security schemes that are available. Accessing health and educational facilities by the migrant workers, especially for women and children, is always a challenge. Then the female migrant workers, who often don't possess legal papers, as we had discussed, are forced to work under worst conditions, and they are often victims of sexual violence. So now let us conclude what all we have discussed. We discussed in detail about the traditional and contemporary discourse on women and work, how the role of women has changed, the work that women do has changed from taking care of the household to going out and work, going out to work, and how this has resulted in several issues and challenges that women face when they go out to work, like neglecting their own families, working for longer hours, being paid less, etc. We also discussed how there is a segregation of roles based on gender, and women often end up doing unpaid domestic work and men are associated with income earning and productive work. We have also seen how the definition of work itself has changed over a period of years, where first there was an egalitarian society. In the traditional discourse, we have seen that there was an egalitarian society where men and women had different roles but but they were seen as equals. But later on, the definition of work itself changed, and the work being done by women was seen as unpaid work, and only the paid work was considered as productive work. Then we have also discussed various employment issues of women in formal and informal sectors, various issues that especially the women working in informal sectors face. We have touched all those issues at length. Finally, we discussed at length various challenges that women face in employment. So that's it for today's session. Thank you.